Good morning. As you have heard, my name is Suzanne Matale, and I'm an African from Zambia. And Zambia is in the southern Africa. We are a landlocked country covering an area of approximately 752,000 kilometers. Our country has a population of 10.4 million, with a growth rate in population of 2.5. We are called a multi-party democratic system of governance, and our economic stay, as you probably all know, is in the mining sector. We also do agriculture, manufacturing, tourism. In spite of all this, we are a poor people in a very rich nation. And therefore, this morning is very important to all of us, because the prospects of our economic growth in our part of the world, and indeed the eradication of poverty in the world, depends on the decisions that you and us make together, because we are one world and we are one people. And therefore, it's very And I want to specifically address you this morning on the issue of mining. We in our country know that mining is a cost. It's a cost to many things, but most importantly, it's a cost to our environment, and it's a cost to the health of our communities, and all these things require financial resources to fix. Mining development agreements, as they stand now in my country, Zambia, are a secret. We who are in the church and in the civil society organization know very well that these secrets are kept between investors and our governments. Therefore, it's impossible for us to know what agreements they are making. And as such, I think we are standing up as Zambians to persuade the powers that be that we don't need mining development agreements that are a secret. And we also know that sometimes these agreements override national law in some cases. And of course, we all know that this secretive arrangement provides special tax rates and concessions outside of our own statutory framework. Let me discuss with you in a little while the challenges in collecting taxes in our countries. Of course, I start with self-criticism as an African and our governance systems. I believe that there's a lack of capacity by our governments to properly tax the mines. And I think there is some kind of reluctance by our governments to put in place proper, effective tax systems. But of course, we all know that the failure by the multinational corporations to declare real profits leads to capital flight. We've been advocating with our government for them to introduce windfall tax or additional profits on taxes, because we know that the mining conglomerates, as they stand now, pay very little or very low royalties. How do we know that tax is being evaded in our countries? We know, of course, that there's a lot of falsifying of invoices. We know that there's inflation and undervaluing of prices to increase costs so that the tax liabilities are diminished. We also know that there are transfer mispricings. Companies sell to each other at inflated prices. There's intra-corporate financial transactions. I think we all know, and we have seen, that there's round-tripping, and this is companies sending their monies offshore and bringing it back to our countries as foreign investments so that they may get preferential tax treatment. What do we do in Zambia for ourselves as a nation? The church and civil society organizations spent time collecting evidence so that we can present these pieces of evidence to our governments so that they can, in turn, ensure that they do something about it. And what are our specific demands when we approach our governments and our own houses of parliament is that we want them to revise all archaic mining laws. We want them to strengthen and formulate new policies and new legal frameworks to bring them in line with human rights of the people in order to protect them from abuse and dangers associated with mining. And I'm referring in this instance to clean and safe environments. We are also demanding from our own governments about transparency and accountability by both investors and our governments, which should include publish what you pay and publish how you spend it. We are speaking to our own governments about publishing what they get in taxes from the mining conglomerates. But we are also urging the investors, the mining companies, and I was there last week to speak to the director of corporate responsibility in one of the mining conglomerates, urging them to be open about how much tax they pay to our governments, to be open about profits that they make. We are also speaking to our own governments about equitable distributions of benefits from these mining companies. And of course, at the end of the day, the bottom line is that we are demanding for an inevitable walk to freedom, inevitable walk to dignity. What we are talking about is justice for all in the world, because there is enough resources to go around. We are asked many times as a church, because I come from a church, what is our involvement in these things? Because according to many people, this is all about politics. Why do we involve ourselves in politics? But our response is that if politics have to do with the people, if the decisions that are made by politicians are going to affect all the people, then it is our business. Our response is, if this is politics, so be it. We are going to be involved in social justice advocacy. I did talk about the secret arrangements with the companies and our governments. Let me now talk a little bit about making us here, you who are sitting here right now, accountable to the world, not only to yourselves, but to the world, including our world, the so-called poor nations. We are saying to you this morning that your role is to ensure that the Western world and their governments, through your lobbying, ensure that they strengthen, amend, or formulate new policies that will hold accountable all the investors that are coming to our land to extract our natural resources, so that the investors are made accountable from their countries of origin. And specifically, we would like them to be accountable to environmental issues. The investors should be willing to contribute to climate change by preventing environmental degradation, by helping in the adaptation, mitigation of climate change in countries in which they invest. They should not take advantage of the weak policy environment and poor legislation and regulatory institutions in Africa. Investors who violate these moral imperatives should be penalized by their countries of origin. In the extractive process, I think our demand from you who are sitting here is that investors who come from your countries should exhibit the same high standards that they are required to employ here in developed countries. We will accept no double standards, and we are employing you to help us to enforce this. And again, we want to say that many of our peoples are displaced from their land for mining activities, and they are given tokens as compensation. We are saying this must be long-term. This should be ongoing as long as those businesses exist in our areas, because local people must and should benefit long-term. I want also to say very quickly that investors should be made to declare same status of their businesses as opposed to declaring losses in our countries, but when they come here on the stock exchange, they are making huge profits. I think there must be a balance, and I think the minister spoke to that this morning. And of course, investors should not find pleasure in being granted tax holidays by governments in order to attract foreign direct investment. These tax holidays, people of God, are recipes for corruption in our countries, lack of transparency and accountability. It is a well-known phenomenon that there's nothing for free, and therefore incentives are not for free. We also want technical support to come to civil organizations, to churches, so that we can uphold our campaign regarding tax evasion by our investors. I would like at this point to just mention that Christian Aid has for a long time been partnering with organizations in the so-called poor countries in building capacities in development agenda and should not relent. Christian Aid, a luta continua, there is still work to be done. Western governments should not perpetuate poverty by letting investors go scotch-free. Before I conclude, and I'm concluding in a minute, I just want to say that tax evasion is actually perpetuating our poverty, because in my country, the high levels of poverty are estimated at 63.8. 46% of those are malnutritioned. High infant mortality at 192 per 1,000 live births. Life expectancy in my country is 39 years old. Adult illiteracy is 35%. On the UN Index for Human Development, we are 165th of the 177 that are listed. And of course, this is compounded by the severe adverse effects of climate change, which is greatly affecting our populations, because we are not able, because of tax evasion, able to raise finances that are required to adapt or to mitigate the effects of climate change. Let me very quickly now conclude by saying that we can only employ you to ensure that there is fairness in sharing of resources. This would lead to prosperity in the poor countries, which would in turn guarantee quality jobs, better social services will be provided, and poverty will be reduced tremendously and can be a thing of the past. We are aware of the race to the bottom, by the effects of globalization, but we also believe that our investors should have human hearts and that the Western world would ensure that fair play is the name of the game. We demand responsible investment in Africa. You and us together can make this a reality. Thank you for your patience, thank you for listening, and thank you so much. Have a good day.